Hello, and welcome to a short introduction to the PrimaryScape notation. My name is Andreas Mundin, and I've been using this notation to create diagrams and describe systems for many years. I created this notation because I needed a simple way to describe organizations and to communicate ideas and solutions to different people. In this video, I will briefly explain the notation. Afterwards, you should be able to look at a PrimaryScape diagram and understand what it's about. PrimaryScape is a notation that makes it easy to describe systems. Systems in this case can be just about anything. It can be a business, it could be parts of an organization, it could be one or more IT systems, or it could be a domain or an area that includes both teams and IT systems. One of the main goals when creating this notation was to make it easy to understand, easy to learn, and easy to use. So without further ado, let's get into it. PrimaryScape is easy to explain with a brief introduction. There are three main concepts. Blue rectangular shapes represent structures. Structures can be systems, teams, domains, organizations. Basically anything that can be considered to exist and have a life cycle. Green rectangular shapes with the corners cut off represents information. Information can be records, documents, files, data, or any other kind of content. Yellow rectangles with rounded corners represents behavior. Behavior includes functions, processes, or any kind of activity or work. There are four types of relationships: data access and data transfer, functional access, and functional transfers. The arrows generally show the direction of the flow of information, and we'll go into more details about these relationships later. Information and behavior are realized in structures. This is just about all the introduction you need for new people to get a basic understanding of any PrimaryScape diagrams that are shown to them. If nothing else, just understanding that structures are blue, information is green, and behavior is yellow will go a long way. Now let's show some simple examples to further illustrate how this works. I've included two simple examples to show how the PrimaryScape concepts and relationships can describe systems. Let's start with the first example. Start with a team. Right away you will notice that I've used a different shade of blue to represent a structure that is made out of people. This is an example of how one can use variations to make a diagram easier to understand. The team performs an activity. In order to perform the activity, the team will be using a system. The system has a function built into it. The team is using this function of the system. Notice the anchor, the solid dot at one end of the relationship. The anchor shows which activity initiates the functional access. The system also stores some information, shown here as dataset A. The function reads information from dataset A in order to do what it needs to do. Notice the arrow on the functional access relationship goes into the function, showing the information going to this function. As a result of the function executing, it creates and writes different information to dataset B. Here the arrow goes into the data, showing that the function is writing data. Then we have a second system. The data transfer shows how the dataset B information is transferred. The data is copied over to be stored in the other system. This diagram does not go into the details as to how this data transfer works. It just shows at a high level that data is transferred from one system to another. Again, the arrow of the relationship shows the direction of the information flow. This was the first example. It's a simple example, but it shows how information and behavior takes place across systems and teams. Now let's take a look at our second example. Again, we start with a team. There's also a system. In this case, we start by showing that the system stores some reportable information. The team is responsible for creating a report. The team queries the system for a report. The team, when performing the activity, accesses the function of the system. The anchor of the functional access relationship shows which behavior or activity it is that initiates the functional access. The function of the system reads from the reportable information, and again notice the direction of the arrow Since the function is accessed and triggered by the team, the only place to send the report is to the requesting user. To emphasize this in this diagram, I added an arrow next to the anchor to show the main direction of the flow of information. However, for practical reasons, I often skip showing this arrow. The direction of the flow of information is typically clear from the context. Now we show that there is a network file share. The team, as part of their work, writes the report to the network file share. Now we introduce a second team, Team B. Team A emails Team B, notifying them that the report has been created and where to find it. This functional transfer triggers Team B to start analyzing the report. To analyze the report, Team B reads it from the network file share. This wraps it up for our second example. Again, we have shown how information and behavior takes place across both IT systems and teams. This concludes our two examples. PrimaryScape is whiteboard friendly. When I created this notation, a lot of the work I did was collaborative in front of a whiteboard. The most common whiteboard markers are black, blue, red, and green. This fits well with the border colors I used with the concept shapes. The red color for the border of the yellow behavior shape was partly selected to match the commonly available red whiteboard marker. Red was also selected because it is difficult to see yellow on a whiteboard. You can also draw PrimaryScape diagrams with just a black marker because all the shapes are uniquely identifiable by their shapes alone. Blue structures have sharp corners. Green information has cutoff corners. Yellow-red behavior has rounded corners. The unique shapes also mean you can print PrimaryScape diagrams in black and white and still be able to differentiate the shapes. With just a little bit of practice, it becomes easy to draw PrimaryScape diagrams on a whiteboard. A whiteboard diagram can then be recreated and cleaned up in your diagramming tool of choice. Here are the two examples, both as whiteboard diagrams and as tool-created diagrams. Let's explain the notation in a little more detail. Let's start with the concepts. Structures are blue. Blue shapes will show where all the structural parts can be found in a diagram. Blue shows you all the things that exist and all the things that can perform actions or store information. Structures can be an IT system. It could be a team. It could be a department, an entire corporation, or even governments or countries. In many IT-focused diagrams, structures are often computer servers, virtual machines, or different types of runtime or storage platform systems. Information is the next conceptual shape. Information is green. Green shapes will show you where all the information or data can be found in a diagram. Green shows you where information is stored, where information is read, created, or transferred. Information can be records in a database, documents in a folder, content in web pages, source code in version control systems, or emails in an email server. Don't think of information shapes as representing data types, which is typical in data modeling diagrams. Instead, think of information as heaps or piles of information or data. Behavior is the last of the conceptual shapes. Behaviors are yellow with red borders. Yellow shapes will show where things happen in a diagram. Behavior can be where work is done, where processes run, where functions execute, or where activities take place. One way to think about it is that work creates friction and generates heat, as shown by the yellow and red behavior shapes. Now let's go through the relationships. Let's start with the data access relationship. The data access relationship is using a dotted line arrow with an open arrowhead. The data access relationship is typically shown between an activity and information. When a function reads information, then the arrow points from the information to the function. When the function writes information, then the arrow points to the information. You can also use arrows in both directions to represent that both reading and writing happens. Now for the data transfer relationship. The data transfer relationship is using a dashed line with a solid arrowhead. The data transfer relationship is typically shown between information shapes. Data transfers can be exact copies, or it can involve transformations. Such details can be discussed and captured outside of the diagram or in other more detailed diagrams. A two-way data transfer is rare and likely means the diagram is at a higher level of abstraction or simplification. Going into more detail, and one will often find that there are different subset of information that is transferred in different directions between the systems. Next is the functional axis relationship. The functional axis relationship starts with a solid dot as an anchor followed by a solid line. The anchor shows which activity is initiating the functional axis. The functional axis relationship is typically represented between behaviors, processes, and functions. It's like a phone call, where one calls and must wait on the line to get the information one is after. When the other end is done, the call is ended and the caller continues working. Here we have an example of one function that stays in control while making an access to one function first, and once that is done, makes another functional access to a second function. In technical terms, this is a synchronous call. Lastly, we have the functional transfer relationship. The functional transfer relationship is using a solid line with a solid arrowhead. The functional transfer relationship is typically represented between behaviors, processes, and functions. One can think of a functional transfer as a trigger. One function triggers another function to start. There's no need to wait for the trigger function to complete. The analogy here is sending an email or text message. In technical terms, this is an asynchronous call. PrimaryScape Variations. PrimaryScape does not include any official variations, but variations can be used to make diagrams easier to read and understand. These are just some examples of variations that I have found useful. The key is to keep the variations within the boundaries of the PrimaryScape colors and shapes. I will describe these variations in more detail in a different video. And now it's time for a recap. There are three concepts. Blue rectangular shapes represent structures. Structures can be systems, teams, domains, organizations, basically anything that can be considered to exist and have a life cycle. Green shapes represent information. They are rectangles with the corners cut off. Information can be records, documents, files, data, or any other kind of content. Yellow shapes represent behavior. These shapes are rectangles with rounded corners. Behavior can represent functions, processes, or any kind of activity or work. Information and behavior are realized in structures. The relationships are data access and data transfer, functional access and functional transfer. The arrows generally show the direction of the flow of information. This recap is just about all the introduction you need for new people to get a basic understanding of any PrimaryScape diagram that will be shown to them. This is the end of this introduction of the PrimaryScape diagram notation. I hope you have found it useful. If you have any questions, feel free to email info@primaryscape.com or reach out to me via LinkedIn. Thank you for your time and have a great day. I almost forgot. You can of course go to the website primaryscape.com for more information about the PrimaryScape notation. And don't forget to subscribe.